Hey guys, welcome to the first part of my two-part devlog for the Brackeys 2020.2 Game Jam. If you'd like to play my game, Cassette Conundrum, the itch.io page is in the description, and I'd love a rating. The Game Jam started at 3 AM on Saturday for me, so I of course got cracking at 7 AM. The theme was Rewind, which immediately reminded me of a VHS or cassette tape. After that, I remembered how you could sometimes pull the film out of a tape and push it back in, and I thought that would be a cool inspiration for the game. I decided on a puzzle platformer where you were a guy made from cassette tape who could pull himself away from the cassette player easier than he could go back towards it. I also used a rewind mechanic that would allow you to go back towards the player faster. Originally I coded it so you couldn't go left, but I quickly decided it wouldn't be as much fun if you could only consistently move in one direction. I quickly got the core mechanics using basic square sprites for the colliders and player. Here I was trying to decide a character concept, as originally I wanted the character to be a cool 80s or 90s kid, but I went against it, which was a good choice. I used a line renderer to make it look like there was cassette tape connecting the character to the cassette player. Now I'm implementing the rewind mechanic, which just adds force from the player to the direction of the cassette player. And this is the base sprite for the main character. I didn't like how he was facing, so I changed it later, but it helps the game immensely. Now I draw the sprite and animation for the cassette player. I gotta admit, the placement of the rewind button was pretty hard to figure out. With the animations for the cassette player down, it was time to figure out how to make this game more fun. Cause so far, it was a glorified tech demo in a gray room. I started with redesigning the player character and making his animations. I used a 3-frame walk cycle, a jump frame, a 3-frame idle animation, and a rewind frame. I just had to do something about that bland gray box, so I made a living room backdrop. I might have forgotten to record a time-lapse of the making of the platforms, but the ground is now a hardwood floor type material. I experimented with making multiple variations of the same room for each level, but decided against it. Now I made a semi-solid platform that the player can jump through but not fall through. I had to remake the background because I decided later on to make the camera more zoomed out to allow for bigger levels, and I liked the old one better, but this one came out nicely anyway. I needed an objective for each level, so I made a door out of a cassette tape and colored it green to have it stand out. Time to get down to coding. For this door, I added a box collider trigger, so whenever the player character entered it on the ground and pressed up or W, he could go through. This kind of trigger collider usage also allowed me to make a key mechanic much later on in the jam. I also made it so the door would trigger an animator bool that would start the open animation. After that was done, I used a level loader to load the next level with a transition in between. Out of all the days in the game jam, day 1 was definitely the most productive and the longest for me. I made a custom loading transition that would be a bunch of tape covering the screen. I decided to make a custom mouse sprite in game, but you can barely tell that it changes. But believe me, it does. I also made a custom game icon for the desktop that I would later reuse as the game logo on my itch page. The last thing I did for day 1 was add a main menu. I made buttons for my YouTube channel and Discord and a start game button. I also made a custom animation for the player character to play in the background. And that's day 1 completed. On to the next day. The very first thing I did on day 2 was make a rewindable on-off block that would switch depending on if you were rewinding or not. I tried to use a tile map collider for these, but I just couldn't figure out how to animate a tile map. If you guys know how I could have, please let me know in the comment section. Basically, to explain how the code works for this, the collider enables or disables depending on 1, whether it's green or red, and 2, whether or not the R key is being held down, and once you let go of R, the collider dot enabled is equal to whatever it wasn't on the last frame. So if it was false while R was held down, it would become true once R is let go. This was pretty fun to make, because it's one of the first game mechanics I'd coded by myself without following any tutorial. It would definitely not be the last one in this game jam, that's for sure. Then I made the tutorial elements that I would place throughout the first couple of levels just to let new players get the hang of things. It was fun to make pixel art text, which I hadn't done much in the past. Here's one of those new mechanics I coded on my own again. I made an item script which would allow me to grab blocks or other items and carry them around the level. I did this by hiding everything when the player pressed G next to the item. Then, when the player pressed G again, the items would spawn back in front of the player. Eventually I would rework the script to make it look nicer. Originally, the item was going to be a dice, but I thought children's letter blocks would look nicer. I gotta tell you, I can't believe that script actually worked relatively easily, and if you want a tutorial on how to do this, hit me up in the comments and I can make a tutorial in a couple of weeks. So that was it for day 2, and that's going to be it for the whole video for today. Next week, I'll be showing the other 5 days, which will be a little longer, but not by much. The first 2 days were definitely the most productive. Just a reminder to check out and rate the Cassette Conundrum itch.io page that's in the description, and subscribe to be ready for the next Game Jam devlog next week. See you later!